transferred to 317. No record of discharge. Dozens of entries. All the Samino outcomes just gone. The last page was a photo, grainy and old, showing a nurse standing in front of room 317's door, her face blurred, the spiral symbol carved into her hand. I didn't sleep after my shift. I drove to Missoula, to a friend's house, needing distance, needing answers. Rachel, my historian friend, met me at a coffee shop, her laptop open to scans of old documents. St. Agnes was a dumping ground, she said, her voice low. People who didn't fit mental cases, drifters, anyone the town didn't want, they sent them to 317. No one came back. The Harts, the family who built it, they believed the land was alive, that it needed voices to speak through. That symbol you saw, it's in their journals. They called it a key. I told her about the scream, the hum, the note. Her face paled. Get out of Haven's End, Avery. That place, it's not just haunted, it's hungry. I went back, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stay away. The hum was in me now, a constant drone, pulling me back to the hospital. That night, the third floor was different. The lights were out, the hall lit only by a faint glow from under room 317's door. The scratching was gone, but the hum was louder, a song without words, weaving through my thoughts. I found another note on the station, in my handwriting again. Open the door. This time, I didn't tear it up. I walked to room 317, my flashlight trembling, the spiral symbol glowing faintly, like it was alive. The keypad beeped, accepting a code I didn't know, 243, the time I'd heard the scream. The door clicked open, revealing a room that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a hospital room, no bed, no equipment, just a bare concrete floor and walls covered in spirals, hundreds of them pulsing with that same sickly light. In the center was a hole, a jagged pit in the floor, the hum pouring out of it like a living thing. I saw shapes in the dark faces, hands, eyes watching me, their mouths moving, singing my name. I don't know how long I stood there, the hum filling my mind, drowning out everything. I saw myself in the pit, my face among the others, my voice joining the song. A hand touched my shoulder, cold and heavy, and a voice whispered, "You're home." It wasn't human, not anymore, but it knew me, knew everything about me. I screamed, or thought I did, and ran, the door slamming shut behind me. I left Haven's End that morning, my car packed with what little I owned. I'm in Minneapolis now, crashing on Rachel's couch, but the hum follows me. It's quieter, but it's there. In my dreams, in the silence between heartbeats, I find spirals everywhere on my apartment door, in the margins of my notebooks, etched into my skin when I wake up. Last night, I found a chart in my bag, one I didn't write. Patient 84, Avery Cole, admitted to 317, singing, "I don't know what lives in St. Agnes, or what it wants, but it's not done with me." If you're ever in Haven's End, if you hear a scream at 2:43 a.m., don't go to the third floor. Don't open the door. Because once the silent word calls you, it never lets you go. The door at the end of the hall. The knocking woke me at 3:13 a.m. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and slow, coming from the door at the end of the hall in my new apartment in Black Hollow, Vermont. I'm Riley Kane, a graphic designer who'd fled Boston after a burnout left me hollowed out, chasing cheap rent and solitude in a town so small it barely registered on a map. The apartment was a Stila second-floor flat in a sagging Victorian house, its paint peeling like old skin, its windows rattling in the October wind. The landlord, a wiry man named Mr. Harrow, had handed me the keys with a warning, "Don't bother with the door at the end of the hall. It's locked. Always has been." I'd nodded, too tired to care, but that night, the knocking changed everything. The sound wasn't loud, but it was wrong precise, too measured, like someone was testing the door's strength. I lay in bed, my heart thudding, staring at the ceiling where shadows danced in the moonlight. The apartment was quiet otherwise, the kind of quiet that feels alive, pressing against your eardrums. I waited, breath held, for another knock. Nothing. Just the faint creak of the old house settling, or so I told myself. But sleep wouldn't come. The air felt thick, heavy with the smell of dust and something sharper, like wet iron. I got up, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, and crept to the hallway. The hall was narrow, its wallpaper faded to a sickly yellow, curling at the edges. At the far end, maybe 20 feet away, was the door Mr. Harrow had mentioned plain wood, no knob, just a rusted keyhole and a faint crack running down its center. I'd barely noticed it when I moved in, assuming it led to storage or a sealed-off room. Now, it seemed to loom, the shadows around it deeper, almost liquid. I stood there, my phone's flashlight casting a weak beam, and listened. No knocking, no sound, just the hum of my own pulse. But as I turned away, I saw Ita faint scratch on the doorframe, thin and jagged, like a claw mark. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrow, my voice shaky as I asked about the door. "Told you, don't bother with it," he snapped, his tone clipped. "Old house, old quirks. Leave it be." He hung up before I could press him. I tried to focus on work, setting up my laptop in the cramped living room, but my eyes kept drifting to the hall. The scratch was still there, deeper than I'd thought, and beside it was another, fresher, like it had been carved while I was on the phone. Black Hollow was a ghost of a town, a cluster of clapboard houses and a general store that doubled as a post office, nestled in a valley where the trees grew too dense and the fog never quite lifted. I went to the store that afternoon, hoping to dig up some local gossip. The clerk, an older woman named Esther, with eyes like chipped flint, gave me a tight smile when I mentioned the apartment. "Harrow's place, huh? You hear anything odd?" she asked, her hands pausing over the register. "Just the house settling," I lied, but her smile faltered. "Mind the door at the end," she said, her voice low. "Folks who live there, they don't stay long." She wouldn't say more, just handed me my change and turned away. Back at the apartment, I couldn't focus. The air felt heavier, the iron smell stronger, seeping from the hall. I searched online for anything about the house, but Black Hollow was a black Heleno records, no history, just a few mentions of a fire in the 1920s that gutted half the town. The house, though, was older, built in 1890 by a family called the Wickers. They'd vanished by 1900, no trace, no explanation. I found a grainy photo on an obscure blog, showing the house in its prime, the door at the end of the hall clearly visible, unmarked, its keyhole glinting like an eye. That night, the knocking came again. 3:13 a.m., 3 raps, slow and deliberate. I didn't move, just lay there, my breath shallow, listening. The knock stopped, but then I heard something worsey whisper, soft and garbled like a voice underwater, coming from the other side of the door. "Riley? Open." My name, clear as day, sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone in, but the screen was dead. Its battery drained despite being fully charged an hour ago. I stayed up, sitting on the couch with a kitchen knife, staring at the hall. The whispers didn't stop, weaving through the silence, my name over and over, mixed with words I couldn't catch. By dawn, I was exhausted, my eyes burning, but I went to the door. The scratches were deeper, forming a pattern now a spiral with jagged edges, like the one I'd seen in the old photo, carved into the house's foundation. I touched it, and the wood was warm, almost pulsing, like it was alive. I went back to the general store, desperate for answers. Esther was there, but her demeanor had changed colder, her eyes avoiding mine. "You heard it, didn't you?" she said, not a question. "The door calls, folks. Always has. Wickers built it, said it was a way to speak to the valley. Most who hear it leave, some don't." "What's behind it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She shook her head. "Don't know. Don't want to. Last tenant, girl named Clara, she tried to find out. Found her car down by the river, empty. Door was scratched to hell after that." I left, my mind racing. Back at the apartment, I tried to work, but the whispers were louder now, even in daylight, seeping through the walls. I found more scratches in the windows, the floor, even the back of my laptop, all forming that same spiral. I called a friend, Sam, a journalist in Burlington, and sent him photos of the door, the scratches, the house. He called back an hour later, his voice tense. "Riley, those symbols, they're old, tied to stories about the valley. The Wickers thought it was a gate, not to a room, but to something else. Get out of there." I wanted to, but the whispers were in my head now, a constant hum pulling me toward the door. That night, the knocking was louder. 5 raps this time, and the whispers were clearer. A chorus of voices, some soft, some angry, all saying my name. I found a crowbar in the basement and pried at the door, desperate to know to make it stop. The wood splintered, revealing not a room but a staircase descending into darkness. The air was cold, thick with the smell of iron and something sweeter, like decay. The whispers surged, a song without words, urging me down. I don't know why I went. My flashlight barely cut through the gloom, the stairs slick with moisture. The walls were stone, rough-hewn, carved with spirals that glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the whispers. The staircase ended in a chamber, vast and echoing, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center was a door, identical to the one upstairs, but larger, its surface black and smooth, like polished obsidian. The whispers came from it, a cacophony of voices, my name woven into their song. I saw shapes in the dark figures, not human, their forms shifting, their eyes glinting like the keyhole upstairs. They didn't move, just watched, their presence heavy, like a hand on my chest. I reached for the door, my hand trembling, and felt it warm, alive, the spirals moving under my fingers. The voices grew louder, and I saw faces in the door's surface, not reflections, but people, their mouths open, their eyes empty, singing. I saw Clara, the tenant Esther mentioned, her face pale, her lips moving. And then I saw myself, my face in the door, my voice joining the chorus. I screamed, or tried to, but the sound was swallowed, the air too thick to breathe. I ran, the stairs endless, the whispers chasing me. I don't know how I made it back to the apartment, but the door at the end of the hall was whole again, unblemished, the scratches gone. I packed my bag, grabbed my keys, and drove until the tank was nearly empty. I'm in a motel now, far from Black Hollow, but the whispers follow, faint but persistent, like a song I can't unhear. I find spirals everywhere, on my car, my clothes, my skin, etched so lightly I barely notice until they bleed. Last night, I found a key in my pocket, rusted and heavy, with no lock to fit. The door at the end of the hall is still there, in my dreams, its surface black and alive, calling me back. I don't know what it is, or what it wants, but it knows my name. If you're ever in Black Hollow, if you hear knocking at 3:13 a.m., don't open the door, don't go down the stairs. Because once you see what's waiting, it never lets you go. The Hollow at Duskwood. The wind carried a whisper that wasn't the wind. It came at dusk, a low, sibilant sound that slithered through the trees of Duskwood, a forgotten corner of rural Arkansas where the pines grew twisted and the ground seemed to swallow light. I'm Harper Wells, a folklorist chasing stories of lost places, and I'd come to Duskwood chasing a remora, single, yellowed note I'd found tucked inside an old book at a flea market in Little Rock. The note was scrawled in faded ink. Stay out of the hollow. It listens. No signature, no date, just those words, and a crude map pointing to a clearing deep in Duskwood's forest. That whisper, the one that wasn't the wind, hit me the first night I camped there, and it changed everything. Duskwood wasn't a town, not really just a scattering of trailers and a gas station with a flickering sign, nestled in a valley where the air always smelled of damp earth and something sour, like rotting fruit. The locals called the forest the Hollow, a name that carried weight, like a warning you didn't question. I'd driven in with my beat-up camper van, my notebook filled with half-baked theories about old settler tales, expecting to find nothing but trees and maybe a ghost story or two. The map led me to a dirt path off Route 62, barely wide enough for my van, the pines closing in like a tunnel. I parked at the edge of a clearing, the ground soft and spongy, the air heavy with that sour smell. My tent was up by sunset, the sky bruised purple, the forest unnaturally quiet, no birds, no crickets, just the faint rustle of leaves. That's when I heard it, the whisper. It wasn't words, not at first, just a low hum, like a crowd murmuring just out of earshot. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand, its beams slicing through the gathering fog. The sound came from the center of the clearing where a single tree stood, its trunk blackened and gnarled, like it had been burned but somehow still lived. The whisper seemed to pulse from it, curling around me, brushing against my skin like cold fingers. I told myself it was the wind, the trees, anything but what it felt like a voice, calling me closer. I didn't go. I crawled into my tent, zipped it shut, and lay there, heart pounding, listening as the whisper grew louder, forming my name, Harper, come. Sleep didn't come. The whisper faded at dawn, but the forest felt different, the shadows deeper, the air thicker. I checked the clearing in daylight, my boots sinking into the soft earth. The tree was taller than I'd thought, its branches twisted into shapes that looked almost deliberate, like hands reaching down. At its base was a ring of stones, weathered and moss-covered, arranged in a perfect circle. Inside the circle, the ground was bare, not a blade of grass, just dirt that looked too dark, too wet. I took photos, my hands shaky, and noticed a faint carving on the tria spiral with jagged edges, like a wound. It wasn't there last night. I was sure of it. I drove to the gas station, needing coffee and answers. The clerk, an old man named Amos with eyes like clouded glass, watched me warily as I paid. "You're camping in the hollow?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Heard anything yet?" "Just the wind," I lied, my skin prickling. He leaned closer, his breath sour with tobacco. "Ain't the wind. Hollow's got a voice. You hear it. You're marked. Don't go back tonight." He turned away, muttering about fools and their stories, but his hands were shaking as he rang me up. Back at the campsite, I couldn't focus. The whisper was gone, but the clearing felt wrong, like the air was watching me. I searched my van for the note, hoping for clues, but found something else, a second note, tucked under my notebook, in my own handwriting, "Go to the tree." I hadn't written it. I'd have remembered. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't leave. The folklorist in me needed to know, needed to understand what the hollow was hiding. I spent the day digging through my research, old books and scanned documents I'd brought along. Duskwood's history was sparse, but there were whispers of a settlement in the 1800s, a group of families who'd built homes in the hollow and vanished by 1850. The locals blamed disease, but the stories were stranger people hearing voices, walking into the forest, and never coming back. The tree in the clearing was mentioned once, in a journal fragment from a preacher named Elias Ward. The hollow speaks through the tree, it chooses its voices, and they sing forever. The spiral symbol was there too, sketched in the margin, labeled the mark of the listener. That night, the whisper came again, sharper, more insistent, at exactly 3:13 a.m. I woke with a start, my tent zipper undone, the flap flapping in a breeze that wasn't there. The whisper was louder, a chorus now, voices overlapping, some soft, some angry, all calling my name. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, the air cold and heavy, smelling of rot and iron. The tree was glowing faintly, its spiral carving pulsing like a heartbeat. I approached, my boots sinking deeper, the ground almost sucking at my feet. The stones around the tree were different now, rearranged, their surfaces scratched with more spirals, some fresh, some old and weathered. I heard footsteps behind me, soft but deliberate. I spun, the flashlight beam sweeping the clearing. Nothing, just fog and shadows. But the whispers grew louder, and now I could make out words. "Harper, join, see." My head throbbed, my vision blurring, like the sound was inside me, tugging at my thoughts. I saw shapes in the fog figures, tall and thin, their faces hidden, moving just out of sight. I ran back to the tent, zipping it shut, but the whispers followed, seeping through the nylon, filling my skull. By morning, I was a wreck, my eyes burning, my hands shaking. I drove to the gas station again, desperate for someone to talk to. Amos was there, but he wouldn't look at me. "You went back," he said, his voice flat. "Saw the tree, didn't you? It's got you now." "What's got me?" I demanded, my voice cracking. He shook his head. "The hollow, it picks people, makes them listen. You'll see." He wouldn't say more, just handed me my coffee and turned away. I went back to the campsite, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't leave. The whisper was in me now, a constant hum pulling me toward the tree. I found more notes in my van, all in my handwriting. Look closer. Touch the mark. Sing. I burned them, but the ashes smelled sweet, like the rot in the clearing. I searched the forest, looking for answers, and found a trap door hidden under a pile of leaves, its wood rotted but carved with the same spiral. It led to a tunnel, narrow and damp, the air thick with that iron rot smell. My flashlight flickered, but I went down, the walls closing in, the whispers growing louder, echoing off the stone. The tunnel opened into a chamber, its ceiling low, its walls covered in spirals, hundreds of them glowing faintly. In the center was a pit, black and bottomless, the whispers pouring out like a tide. I saw things in the dark faces, hands, eyes watching me, their mouths moving, singing that wordless song. I recognized one face impossibly, my mother, dead 10 years, her eyes empty, her lips forming my name. I stumbled back, my flashlight falling, its beam spinning across the walls. The whispers surged, and I felt Ida pull, like the pit was reaching for me, unraveling me. I don't know how I got out. I remember running, the tunnel stretching longer than it should, the whispers chasing me. I made it to the van, drove until the gas light blinked, and didn't stop until I was in Little Rock. I'm in a motel now, the city's noise a faint shield against the hum. But it's still there. In my head, in my dreams, calling me back to the hollow. I find spirals everywhere on my door, my notebooks, my skin, etched so lightly they bleed before I notice. Last night, I found a stone in my pocket, smooth and cold, carved with that jagged spiral. The tree is waiting. I see it when I close my eyes, its branches reaching, its roots curling through my thoughts. I don't know what the hollow is or what it wants, but it knows me. If you're ever in Duskwood, if you hear a whisper that isn't the wind, don't go to the clearing. Don't touch the tree, because once it chooses you, it never lets go. The villa at Red Pines. The light flickered at exactly 2:47 a.m. Not a power surge, not a loose bulb, but a single, deliberate pulse that made the shadows in the villa twist like living things. I'm Quinn Adler, a travel writer burned out from city life, chasing solitude in Red Pines, a nowhere town in northern Idaho where the forest swallowed the horizon. I'd rented the villa, sprawling century-old house on the edge of town, because it was cheap and promised quiet. The listing called it historic charm, but didn't mention the light in the upstairs window, the one that flickered every night, or the Polaroid I found under the floorboards my first day there, showing a man standing in that same window, his face blurred with the words "Don't look back" scrawled on the back in red ink. That flicker, that photo-A, was the hook that pulled me into something I still can't explain. Red Pines was barely a town. A gas station, a diner with cracked vinyl booths, and a handful of houses clinging to the edge of a forest so dense it seemed to breathe. The villa stood alone, a mile from the nearest neighbor, its stone walls weathered to a dull gray, its windows dark except for that one upstairs, always glowing faintly, even when the power was off. The air around it smelled of pine and something metallic, like blood left to dry. I'd arrived on a chilly October afternoon, the sky heavy with clouds, the wind carrying a faint hum, like a radio tuned to static. The realtor, a nervous woman named Lila, handed me the keys and muttered, "Don't mess with the upstairs. It's particular." I thought she meant the plumbing. Inside, the villa was a time capsule creaking hardwood floors, faded wallpaper with floral patterns curling at the edges, and furniture that smelled of dust and old secrets. The staircase to the second floor was steep, its banister worn smooth, leading to a locked door at the end of the hall. The key didn't work, and Lila's number went straight to voicemail when I tried to call. I set up in the downstairs bedroom, figuring I'd deal with it later. That night, I woke to the flicker too. 47 a.m., the light in the upstairs window pulsing once, then going dark. I checked the breaker, thinking it was a fault, but everything was fine. That's when I found the Polaroid, slipped under a loose floorboard in the living room, the man's blurred face staring out, his hand pressed against the glass. I didn't sleep after that. The house felt alive, the silence too heavy, broken only by the occasional creak of the walls, like footsteps pacing above me. My skin prickled, my mind replaying the Polaroid's warning, "Don't look back." I tried to work, typing up notes for my next article, but my eyes kept drifting to the staircase, to the locked door I hadn't seen yet. The metallic smell was stronger now, seeping from the walls, mixing with the musty scent of old wood. I told myself it was just the house, just my imagination, but the flicker came again the next night. 2:47 m. And this time, I heard something a whisper, faint and garbled, like a voice trapped in static, coming from upstairs. Quinn, see? I went to the diner the next morning, needing coffee and answers. The waitress, an older woman named Dot, with eyes that didn't blink enough, poured me a cup and leaned in when I mentioned the villa. "You're staying at the old Hartwell place?" she said, her voice low. "Heard anything yet?" "Just the wind," I lied, my hands tightening around the mug. She didn't buy it. That house don't like guests. Last folks who stayed there, a couple from Boise, left after a week. Said the lights kept talking. She wouldn't say more, just shuffled off, muttering about bad ground. I asked around, but the locals were cagey. Their answers, vague stories of the Hartwell family, who'd built the villa in the 1890s and vanished by 1910, of lights that flickered without power, of whispers no one could trace. One man, an old-timer named Cal, grabbed my arm as I left. "Don't look behind you," he said, his breath sour with whiskey. "Not when the light goes on." Back at the villa, I couldn't focus. The whisper was louder now, even in daylight, weaving through the hum of the forest outside. I searched the house, looking for clues, and found a trap door in the pantry, its hinges rusted, its wood carved with a spiral symbol jagged, like a scar. I pried it open, the air below cold and damp, smelling of iron and decay. My flashlight revealed a narrow staircase, descending into darkness. I didn't go down, not then, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting, listening. That night, the flicker came again, 2:47 a.m., but this time the whisper was clearer, my name sharp and insistent. "Quinn, come." I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding, the key suddenly working in the locked door. The upstairs hall was long, its wallpaper peeling, the air thick with that metallic smell. At the end was a room, its door ajar, the flickering light spilling out. Inside was a single window, the one I'd seen from below, its glass smeared with something dark, like blood wiped away. On the floor was another Polaroid, showing me standing in that room, my face blank, my eyes too dark. I hadn't taken it, I hadn't been here before. I ran downstairs, locked the door, and shoved the chair against it. The whisper followed, louder now, a chorus of voices, some soft, some angry, all calling my name. I called Lila, but her voicemail was different now, just static, and a faint whisper, my name, over and over. I tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start, the engine dead, the dashboard flickering like the light upstairs. The house creaked, the shadows moving, and I found more Polaroids under the couch, in my bag, on the kitchen counterall, showing me in that room, my face wrong, my hands pressed against the window. I went back to the trapdoor, needing answers. The staircase led to a basement, its walls stone, slick with moisture, carved with more spirals, glowing faintly. The air was heavy, the iron decay smell overwhelming. At the far end was a door, black and smooth, like the one upstairs but larger, its surface pulsing with that same sickly light. The whisper came from it, a song now, wordless but alive, pulling me closer. I saw shapes in the dark figures, not human, their forms shifting, their eyes glinting like the Polaroid's flash. They didn't move, just watched, their presence heavy, like a hand on my throat. I touched the door, and it was warm, alive, the spirals moving under my fingers. The voices surged, and I saw faces in the door's surface not reflections, but people, their mouths open, singing. I saw the man from the first Polaroid, his face clear now, his eyes empty. And then I saw myself, my face in the door, my voice joining the song. I screamed, or tried to, but the sound was swallowed, the air too thick to breathe. I don't know how I got out. I remember running, the stairs endless, the whispers chasing me. I made it to the van, drove until the gaslight blinked, and didn't stop until I was in Spokane. I'm in a motel now, the city's noise, a faint shield against the hum. But it's still there. In my head, in my dreams, calling me back to the villa. I find spirals everywhere on my door, my notebooks, my skin, etched so lightly they bleed before I notice. Last night, I found a Polaroid in my wallet, showing me in that upstairs room, my face blank, the words, "Don't look back," written in my own handwriting. The villa is waiting. I see it when I close my eyes, its light flickering, its door open, calling me home. I don't know what lives in Red Pines or what it wants, but it knows me. If you're ever in northern Idaho, if you see a villa with a light that flickers at 2:47 a.m., don't stay, don't look at the window, because once you do, the house never lets you go. The shadow on the sill. The shadow moved at 4:12 a.m. Not a flicker of moonlight or a passing car's headlights, but a deliberate, fluid motion across the windowsill of my rented cabin in Hollow Creek, Kentucky. I'm Mara Tate, a private investigator who'd retreated to this speck of a town to escape a case that went bad real bad in Louisville. I needed quiet, a place to lick my wounds, but Hollow Creek wasn't quiet, not really. The cabin, a weathered box of logs perched on a hill overlooking a dense forest, came with a warning from the owner, a grizzled man named Amos. Don't open the window by the bed. Not ever. I thought he was joking, or maybe just superstitious, until I saw that shadow and found the note slipped under my door the next morning. It saw you. Don't look again. The handwriting wasn't mine, and it wasn't Amos's. Hollow Creek was barely a Tona gas station, a bar with a flickering neon sign and a scattering of homes swallowed by the pines. The air was heavy with the scent of damp moss and something acrid, like burned metal, that clung to the back of my throat. I'd arrived in late October. The sky, a bruised gray, the forest so thick it seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. The cabin was cheap, isolated, perfect for disappearing. It had one bedroom, a sagging couch, and a kitchen that smelled of mildew and old grease. The window by the bed, the one Amos warned about, was small, its glass warped, distorting the trees outside into twisted shapes. I'd covered it with a curtain, but that first night I woke to the shadow-long, thin, moving like ink spilling across the sill, pausing as if it knew I was watching. I didn't sleep after that. My heart hammered, my mind replaying the shadow's movement, too smooth, too alive. The cabin was silent, but the silence felt wrong, like it was waiting. I checked the door, the locks, the windows, everything was secure, but the air was thick, heavy with that burned metal smell. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a branch swaying in the wind, but the note under the door changed everything. It was on yellowed paper, the ink fresh, the words jagged, like they'd been written in a hurry. I called Amos, my hands shaking, but his phone went to voicemail, his message a curt, "Leave a message, I'm out." The next day, I drove to the bar, needing answers. The place was dim, smelling of stale beer and cigarette smoke. The bartender, a woman named Ruth with eyes like chipped ice, poured me a coffee and listened as I described the shadow, the note. "You're at the old Whitaker cabin," she said, not a question. "Folks, don't stay there long. That window, it's got a history." "What kind?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She leaned closer, her voice low. "Whitakers built that place in the 1880s. Said the forest talked to them through the window. Last Whitaker, a girl named Eliza, disappeared in 92. Left a note like yours," said the shadow was watching. Ruth turned away, busying herself with a rag, but I caught the fear in her eyes. I went back to the cabin, the note burning a hole in my pocket. The forest felt closer now, the trees leaning in, their branches scratching the roof like fingers. I searched the cabin, looking for clues, and found a loose floorboard under the bed. Beneath it was a tin box, rusted and heavy, containing a journal pages, yellowed, ink faded, but the handwriting clear. It belonged to Eliza Whitaker, dated 1992. She wrote about the shadow, how it came every night at 4:12 a.m., how it whispered her name, how it moved inside the window, not outside. The last entry was a single line. "It's not a shadow, it's me." My stomach twisted. I checked the window, the curtain still in place, but the glass was cold, too cold, like it was pulling heat from the room. That night, the shadow came again. 4:12 a.m., sliding across the sill, slow and deliberate, like it was testing the curtain's edge. The whisper followed, soft and guttural, my name woven into a sound that wasn't words. Mara, look. I didn't. I sat on the couch, my gun in my lap, staring at the curtain, waiting for dawn. But the whisper didn't stop, and by morning, another note was under the door. You looked. It knows. I hadn't looked. I was sure of it. But the note felt like an accusation, heavy in my hand. I drove to the gas station, hoping to find Amos, but the clerk, a kid with nervous eyes, said he'd been gone for days. You're at the Whitaker place? He asked, his voice cracking. Get out. That window? It ain't right. He wouldn't say more, just handed me my change and turned away. Back at the cabin, I couldn't think straight. The whisper was louder now, even in daylight, a hum that vibrated in my bones. I found more notes under my pillow, in my bag, tucked inside the journal, in that same jagged handwriting, all saying the same thing. Look. I burned them, but the ashes smelled wrong, sweet and metallic, like the forest itself. I searched the cabin again, finding scratches on the walls, the floor, the window frame within, precise, forming a spiral pattern that matched one in Eliza's journal, labeled The Mark of the Watcher. I called a friend, Lena, a retired cop in Louisville, and sent her photos of the notes, the journal, the scratches. She called back, her voice tight. Mara, that symbol, it's old, tied to stories about the forest. The Whitakers thought it was a door, not to a place, but to something. Get out of there! Now. I wanted to, but the whisper was in my head, a constant pull, urging me to the window. I covered it with a blanket, nailed it shut, but the shadow came anyway. 4:12 a.m. Moving through the blanket, its form sharper now, like a silhouette of me, but wrong too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an impossible angle. I didn't sleep. I sat by the door, gun in hand, listening as the whisper grew into a chorus, voices overlapping, some soft, some screaming, all saying my name. I found another note, this time inside my coat pocket. You're already here. My handwriting, but not mine. I tore it up, my hands shaking, and decided to leave. I packed my bag, grabbed my keys, but the car wouldn't start, the engine dead, the dashboard flickering like the shadow on the sill. Desperate, I pried open the window frame, needing to know. The glass was smooth, but the wood was warm, pulsing, the spiral scratches glowing faintly. The shadow was there, inside the glass, not outside. Its form shifting, my face staring back, but not my face me. Eyes were empty, my mouth open, whispering. I smashed the window, the glass shattering, but the shadow didn't move. It reached out, its fingers brushing the air, and I felt Ida tug, like something pulling at my core, unraveling me. I ran, leaving everything, my bag, my gun, my sanity. The forest was a blur, the trees closing in, their branches snagging my clothes. I made it to the gas station, hitchhiked to Lexington, and didn't stop until I was in a motel. The city's noise, a faint shield against the whisper. But it's still there. In my head, in my dreams, calling me back to the cabin. I find spirals everywhere on my door, my skin, my mirror, etched so lightly they bleed before I notice. Last night, I found a note in my wallet, in my handwriting. Look behind you. I don't look. I can't. But the shadow is there, in every reflection, every dark corner, waiting. I see it when I close my eyes. Its form sharper, my face clearer, whispering my name. I don't know what lives in Hollow Creek, or what it wants, but it knows me. If you're ever in Kentucky, if you see a cabin with a window that doesn't look right, don't stay. Don't look at the sill. Because once the shadow sees you, it never lets you go. The last guest at the Starlight Motel. The neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat, casting a sickly pink glow over the cracked asphalt of the Starlight Motel's parking lot. I found the place by accident, or so I thought, when my car broke down on a lonely stretch of Route 17 in rural Nevada. My name's Nora Quinn, a freelance journalist chasing a story about forgotten towns in the Mojave Desert. It was October, the air sharp with the scent of sagebrush and dust, and I was stranded, my old Honda Civic coughing its last breath 10 miles from anywhere. The motel was the only sign of life, a squat, U-shaped building with peeling paint and a half-lit sign that read Starlight Motel, Vacancy. Below it, in smaller letters, someone had scrawled in marker, last room left. I grabbed my backpack and trudged toward the office, the gravel crunching under my boots. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint buzz of the neon and a distant coyote's howl. The office door creaked as I pushed it open, releasing a musty smell of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. A bell above the door jingled, too loud in the quiet. Behind the counter sat a man, gaunt and pale, his eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in years. His name tag read Cliff. He didn't look up from the crossword puzzle he was scribbling in, but his voice was low, raspy. Last room's yours, number 13, keys on the hook. I glanced at the wall behind him, where a single key dangled from a rusted hook, the tag marked 13 in faded red ink. You don't need my name or anything? I asked, fishing for my wallet. He shook his head, still not looking up. Don't need it. Just sign the book. He slid a leather-bound ledger across the counter, its pages yellowed and curling. I scrawled my name, noticing the last entry was dated 3 months ago. John Doe, room 13. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged like it had been written in a hurry. I handed over a 20, but Cliff waved it away. First night's free, you'll need it. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't grasp. I took the key, its metal cold against my palm, and headed to room 13. The motel was eerily quiet. The other rooms dark, their curtains drawn tight. My room was at the far end of the U, its door slightly ajar, as if someone had just left. The air inside was damp, smelling of mildew and something metallic, like old pennies. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the faded wallpaper. The bed was made, but the sheets were threadbare, stained with faint brown spots. A rotary phone sat on the nightstand, its cord frayed, and a small mirror hung above a chipped sink. I locked the door, double-checked it, and tried to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I called a tow truck, but the line crackled, the operator's voice fading in and out. Nearest truck's in Reno, she said. Might be a day or two. I hung up, frustrated, and lay on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. That's when I heard a faint tapping, like fingers drumming on glass. It came from the window, but when I pulled the curtain back, there was nothing, just the empty parking lot and the neon signs flicker. The tapping stopped, then started again, this time from the mirror. I froze, my reflection staring back, but it felt wrong, like the face wasn't quite mine. My eyes looked too wide, my skin too pale. I covered the mirror with a towel, telling myself it was just exhaustion. Sleep didn't come easy. The tapping continued, irregular but persistent, now joined by a low hum, like a refrigerator running in another room. I pulled the pillow over my head, but the sound burrowed into my skull, vibrating in my teeth. Around midnight, the phone rang, a shrill, jarring sound that made me bolt upright. I hesitated, then picked it up. Static crackled, thick and heavy, but beneath it, I heard a voice as soft, almost a whisper, saying my name, Nora, stay. I slammed the receiver down, my heart pounding. The hum stopped, but the silence was worse, thick and suffocating, like the room was holding its breath. The next morning, I went back to the office, determined to get answers. Cliff was there, still hunched over his crossword as if he hadn't moved. Who else is staying here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I heard noises last night. He didn't look up. Just you. Last guest checked out months ago. But the ledger? Folks come and go, he said, his pencil scratching the paper. Room 13 special, always the last one taken. I pressed him, but he wouldn't say more. Just pointed me to a diner across the road for breakfast. The diner was a relic, its chrome stools rusted, its formica counters chipped. The waitress, a woman with gray hair and a permanent frown, poured me coffee that tasted like tar. I asked about the motel, hoping for some local gossip. Her eyes narrowed. Starlight? You're staying there? She leaned in, her voice low. Get out before dark. That place, it don't let go of everyone. She wouldn't elaborate, just shuffled away, muttering about bad ground. I left a tip and headed back, my unease growing. The motel felt different in daylight, the shadows sharper, the air heavier. I decided to poke around, see if I could find anything about room 13 or the strange noises. The other rooms were locked, their windows boarded or covered with grime. But behind the motel, hidden by overgrown sagebrush, I found a storm cellar, its doors padlocked but rusted through. I pried them open with a crowbar from my car, the hinges screaming in protest. The cellar was dark, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and decay. My flashlight revealed shelves lined with jars, their contents murky, floating in cloudy liquid. Old furniture was stacked against the wall shares, a dresser, a cracked mirror like the one in my room. In the corner, under a tarp, was a box of papers, receipts, maintenance logs, and a guest ledger, different from the one in the office. Its pages were filled with names, all for room 13, dating back decades. Each entry had a note beside it. Didn't leave, gone by morning, heard the song. My name was there too, in my own handwriting, dated yesterday. But I hadn't written in this ledger. I'd signed the one in the office. My hands shook as I stuffed the ledger into my backpack. I needed to get out, tow truck or not. But as I climbed out of the cellar, I heard it again, the tapping, louder now, coming from the direction of my room. I ran back, my boots slipping on the gravel, and found the door to room 13 wide open. Inside, the mirror was uncovered, the towel neatly folded on the bed. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't right. My eyes were wrong, too dark, and my mouth was moving, humming a tune I didn't know. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the car, but the key wouldn't turn. The engine sputtered, then died, the dashboard lights flickering like the neon sign. The tapping was everywhere now, on the windows, the roof, the hood, a relentless rhythm that matched the hum in my head. I stumbled out, the desert air cold against my skin, and ran toward the highway, hoping to flag down a car. But the road was empty. The horizon swallowed by a creeping fog that hadn't been there an hour ago. I don't know how long I walked, but the motel kept appearing, no matter which direction I went. The neon sign glowed brighter, the words, "Last room left," pulsing like a lure. I tried to call for help, but my phone was dead. Its screen cracked, showing a photo I hadn't taken. Me standing in room 13, my face blank, my hands pressed against the mirror. Desperate, I went back to the office. Cliff was gone, the crossword abandoned, half finished. The ledger was open, my name now circled in red ink with a new note, singing. I tore through the office, looking for anything, a phone, a map, a way out. In a drawer, I found a Polaroid, faded but clear. A woman in room 13, her face pale, her eyes empty, standing in front of the mirror. On the back, in the same shaky handwriting as the ledger, "She stayed too long." The hum was louder now, a song without words, pulling me back to room 13. I fought it, my nails digging into my palms, but my feet moved anyway, step by step, until I was standing in the room again. The mirror was waiting, its surface rippling like water. My reflection smiled, but I wasn't smiling. It raised a hand, beckoning, and I felt a tug, not just in my mind, but in my chest, like something was unraveling inside me. I don't know how I broke free. I remember screaming, smashing the mirror with the phone, glass shattering across the floor. The hum stopped, the room silent, but the air was thick, heavy with the scent of blood. I ran, leaving everything, my bag, my car, my sanity. I hitchhiked to Reno, my hands trembling, my mind replaying the song I couldn't shake. I told myself it was over, that I'd escaped. But it's not over. The hum is still there, faint but growing, like a radio signal tuning in. At night, I see the motel in my dreams, the neon sign flickering, the mirror whole again, my reflection waiting. Last week, I found a key in my pocket, rusted and cold, marked 13. I live in a city now, far from the desert, but yesterday, I saw Ita neon sign in an alley, flickering pink, the words, "Last room left," glowing in the dark. I don't sleep anymore. The song is louder, and sometimes I catch myself humming along, my voice, not my own. I don't know what the Starlight Motel is, or what it wants, but it's not done with me. If you're ever on Route 17, if you see a neon sign in the desert, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't take the key, because once you check into room 13, you never check out. The Hollow Choir. The rain came down in sheets. a relentless gray curtain that blurred the world beyond the windshield. I was driving home from a weekend in Portland, my headlights cutting weak beams through the storm as I navigated the winding backroads of Southern Oregon. The radio had long since fizzled into static, leaving only the rhythmic thump of wipers and the hiss of tires on wet asphalt. I was tired, bone tired after a fight with my girlfriend that had left me raw and restless. Maybe that's why I didn't notice the sign at first. It was small, rusted, leaning crookedly at the edge of the road like it had been forgotten for decades. Hollow Creek, 3 miles. I frowned, squinting through the rain. I'd driven this route 100 times, and I'd never seen a turnoff for any place called Hollow Creek. My GPS was useless out here, the screen stuck on a loading spiral, so I figured it was just an old logging road or some ghost town marker. Still, something about it tugged at me, a faint, uneasy pull, like a whisper you can't quite hear but feel in your chest. I kept driving, the sign fading into the rearview mirror, but the name stuck with me. Hollow Creek. It sounded wrong, like a name you'd find scratched into the bark of a tree in a place nobody goes. 10 minutes later, the rain got worse. A deluge that turned the road into a river. My old Civic started to hydroplane, the wheel jerking in my hands. I cursed, slowing to a crawl, when my headlights caught something up ahead, a flicker of white through the trees. It was a figure, a woman maybe, standing motionless at the edge of the road. She was dressed in something pale, a dress or a nightgown, soaked through and clinging to her skin. Her hair hung in dark, wet strands over her face, and she was just standing there, head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. My stomach twisted. This was the middle of nowhere, miles from any house or gas station. Nobody should be out here, not in this storm. I slowed the car to a stop, my hands tight on the wheel. Part of me wanted to keep driving every horror movie I'd ever seen, screamed at me to do just that, but she looked like she needed help. I rolled down the window, rain spattering my face. "Hey," I called, my voice barely cutting through the downpour. "You okay? Need a ride?" She didn't move. Didn't even flinch. Just stood there, her head tilted, her body unnaturally still. The air felt heavy, like the storm was pressing down on me, and I swear I heard something, a low hum, like a distant choir, rising and falling with the wind. I leaned out further, shouting again, but before I could say anything else, she turned and walked into the trees. Not ran. Walked. Slow, deliberate, like she knew exactly where she was going. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at the spot where she'd vanished. The hum was gone, replaced by the drumming rain and my own uneven breathing. I told myself it was nothing. A drifter maybe, or someone from a nearby campsite. But the unease lingered, sharp and cold, like a blade against my spine. I glanced at the dashboard clock, 11:47 p.m., and decided I needed to get moving. That's when I saw the sign again. Hollow Creek, 3 miles. My breath caught. It was the same sign, same rusted edges, same faded letters, but I hadn't turned around. I'd been driving straight, no loops, no detours. There was no way it could be here again. I pressed the gas, harder than I meant to, the tires spinning before catching. I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of there, away from that sign, that woman, that hum that still echoed faintly in my skull. But the road didn't cooperate. It twisted, narrowed, the trees closing in until their branches scraped the sides of my car. The headlights flickered, and for a split second, I thought I saw her again, standing in the middle of the road, her pale dress glowing in the dark. I slammed on the brakes, my chest heaving, but there was nothing, just rain and shadows. Then the engine died. The silence was worse than the storm. No hum of the motor, no wipers, just the rain hammering the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. I turned the key, but the car only clicked, dead as a stone. My phone was useless, no signal, no GPS, just a blank screen reflecting my own pale face. I sat there, listening to my heartbeat, trying to think. The sign had said Hollow Creek was 3 miles away. If I could find it, maybe there'd be a gas station, a house, something. I grabbed my jacket, zipped it up, and stepped out into the rain. The cold hit me like a slap, soaking me through in seconds. The road was a muddy ribbon, flanked by dense forest that seemed to swallow the light from my flashlight. I started walking, the beam shaking in my hand, catching glimpses of twisted branches and glistening leaves. Every step felt wrong, like I was trespassing in a place that didn't want me. The air smelled of wet earth and something else, something sharp, like ozone or burnt metal. After what felt like an hour, I saw lights ahead. Not headlights, but a faint, flickering glow, like candles in a window. As I got closer, I realized it was a town or what was left of one. A cluster of buildings, half collapsed, their wooden facades rotting and streaked with moss. A faded sign read, "Welcome to Hollow Creek Est, 1883." The letters were barely legible, eaten away by time and weather. The street was empty, the buildings dark, except for that flickering light coming from what looked like a church at the far end. Its steeple leaned crookedly, like it might topple at any moment, but the windows glowed with a soft amber warmth. I don't know why I went toward it. Maybe it was the cold, or the hope of finding someone who could help. Maybe it was something else, something I couldn't name, pulling me like a hook in my chest. The church door was ajar, creaking softly in the wind. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning, and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and something sweeter, like rotting fruit. Rows of pews stretched toward a cracked altar, where a dozen candles burned in a haphazard circle. Their flames didn't flicker, didn't waver, just burned steady and bright, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. And then I heard it again, the hum, louder now, rising and falling like a choir, singing in a language I couldn't understand. It wasn't coming from the altar or the pews. It was coming from the walls, the floor, the air itself. My skin prickled, every nerve screaming at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen, staring at the shadows, on the wall shadows that weren't mine. They were human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, their edges blurry like they were drawn in smudged charcoal. They moved when I didn't, sliding along the walls, circling the room. The hum grew louder, more insistent, and I realized it wasn't a choir. It was voices dozens, maybe hundreds overlapping, whispering, chanting. Words I couldn't make out, but they filled me with a dread so deep it felt like my bones were turning to ice. I backed toward the door, my flashlight shaking in my hand, but the shadows followed, their movements jerky and unnatural. One of them stopped, its head tilting like the woman's had, and I swear I saw eyes white, empty, staring right through me. I turned and ran, the door slamming shut behind me, the hum chasing me into the rain. I don't know how long I ran. The town seemed to stretch forever, the buildings repeating, the street looping back on itself. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. The hum was everywhere now, in my head, in my chest, vibrating through my teeth. I stumbled into an alley, hoping to find a way out, but it was a dead end. Just a brick wall, slick with rain and covered in scratches deep. Jagged marks, like something had clawed at it for years. I turned to backtrack, but she was there. The woman in the pale dress. Her hair hung over her face, but I could see her mouth now, stretched into a smile that was too wide, too wrong. Her lips didn't move, but I heard her voix sonore with my ears, but inside my skull. "You heard us," she said, the words sharp and cold. "You came!" I tried to scream, but my throat was tight, my voice gone. She stepped closer, her dress dragging through the mud, and I saw her hands-long, thin fingers, too many of them, curling like spider legs. The hum surged, deafening now, and the shadows were behind her, dozens of them, their shapes twisting and merging into something I couldn't comprehend. I don't remember how I got away. One moment I was in the alley, the next I was back on the road, my car looming out of the rain like a lifeline. The engine started this time, roaring to life, and I floored it, the tires screaming as I sped away from Hollow Creek. The sign was gone when I looked back. No town, no church, just trees and rain and darkness. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I'm back in my apartment, but I haven't slept more than an hour at a time. The hum is still with me. It's faint, like a radio left on in another room, but it's there, always there. Sometimes I wake up and find scratches on my arms, shallow but precise, like someone's trying to write something I can't read. My girlfriend thinks I'm losing it, says I need to see a doctor, but I can't tell her what happened. I can't tell anyone. Last night, I found an old map in a thrift store, tattered and yellowed, dated 1890. I don't know why I bought it. But when I spread it out on my kitchen table, I saw it Hollow Creek, marked in faded ink, right where I'd been that night. I stared at it, my hands shaking, and that's when I noticed the note scrawled in the margin, in handwriting I didn't recognize. They sing to be heard. They sing to be found. I burned the map, threw it in the sink, and watched it curl into ash. But the hum is louder now, and last night I saw her again. Not in a dream, not in a memory. She was standing at the foot of my bed, her head tilted, her smile wide and wrong. The shadows were with her, their eyes glowing white, and the hum was a scream in my skull. I don't know what they want. I don't know why they chose me. But I know one thing. Hollow Creek isn't gone. It's still out there, waiting, singing. And every night, the hum gets louder, pulling me back. The Whispering Mile. The fog was so thick that night, it felt like driving through a dream. I was on my way back from a dead-end job interview in Eugene, Oregon, my pickup truck rattling along a forgotten stretch of Highway 17, a two-lane scar cutting through the Cascades. The radio was dead, the signal lost somewhere in the mountains, and my phone had been useless for hours. No bars, no GPS, just a blank screen mocking me. It was just me, the headlights, and the fog, curling like ghostly fingers around the pines. I was exhausted, my eyes burning, my hands tight on the wheel. That's when I saw Eat a Mile marker, rusted and crooked, glowing faintly in my high beams. Mile 13. I frowned. I'd driven this road before, or so I thought, and I didn't remember any mile markers out here. The number felt wrong, like it didn't belong. I shook it off, blaming the fog and my own tired brain, but as I drove on, the air grew heavier, the silence thicker. The fog seemed to pulse, like it was breathing, and I swear I heard something a faint whisper, like voices murmuring just beyond my hearing. I turned up the heat, trying to shake the chill creeping up my spine, but it didn't help. The whispers followed me, soft and insistent, weaving through the hum of the engine. 10 minutes later, I saw it again. Mile 13. Same rusted sign, same faded paint, same eerie glow. My stomach dropped. I hadn't turned around, hadn't hit a loop. The road was straight, or as straight as these mountain passes get. I slowed down, my heart thudding, and leaned closer to the windshield. The fog parted just enough to show the sign's edges, jagged and warped, like something had tried to claw it out of the ground. The whispers grew louder, not words, but a cadence, a rhythm that made my teeth ache. I floored the gas, the truck lurching forward, desperate to leave that sign behind. But the road seemed to fight me, twisting tighter, the pines closing in until their branches scraped the truck's sides like nails on a chalkboard. The headlights flickered, and for a split second, I saw something in the foga shape, tall and thin, standing just off the road. It wasn't human, not quite. Its limbs were too long, its head too small, and it moved wrong, like a puppet with half its strings cut. I blinked, and it was gone. But the whispers surged, filling the cab with a sound that wasn't sound, a pressure that squeezed my skull. Then the engine sputtered and died. The silence was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the soft patter of fog against the windshield. I turned the key, but the truck only clicked, lifeless. My phone was still dead, the screen reflecting my own wide-eyed stare. The whispers were clearer now, not voices, but a chorus of sound hisses, clicks, low moans that seemed to come from the fog itself. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, its beam weak and trembling, and stepped out into the cold. The air smelled wrong, like damp stone and something metallic, like blood or rust. The fog was so dense I could barely see 10 feet ahead, the pines looming like silent sentinels. I started walking, following the road, the mile marker's glow fading behind me. Every step felt like a violation, like the forest was watching, waiting. The whispers followed, circling me, sometimes behind, sometimes ahead, always just out of reach. I tried to focus on the road, on finding help, but the ground felt soft, unsteady, like it might swallow me whole. After what felt like an hour, I saw a light of faint, sickly green glow flickering through the trees. It wasn't headlights or a house. It was something else, something that made my skin crawl. I should have turned back, but my truck was dead, and the whispers were louder now, urging me forward. I followed the light, my boots sinking into the muddy shoulder, until I stumbled into a clearing. It wasn't a town, not exactly. It was a cluster of structure shuts, maybe, or shacks built from wood and stone, their surfaces slick with moss and something darker, like oil. They were arranged in a circle around a pit, deep and black, the green glow pulsing from its depths. The air here was thick, heavy with the smell of decay and that same metallic tang. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices that weren't human, weren't animal, weren't anything I could name. They came from the pit, from the huts, from the fog itself. I approached one of the shacks, its door hanging off a single hinge. Inside, the walls were covered in marking spirals, lines, shapes that didn't make sense but hurt to look at. There were objects scattered on the floor, a broken watch, a child's shoe, a cracked phone, all coated in a thin layer of dust and something sticky. My flashlight caught a mirror in the corner, its surface warped and cloudy. I looked into it, and for a moment, I didn't see myself. I saw something, a face that wasn't a face, eyes that weren't eyes, staring back with a hunger that made my blood run cold. I stumbled back, my flashlight dropping, the beam spinning wildly. The whispers surged, and I felt Ida presence, not behind me, but around me, like the fog itself was alive. I ran, my boots slipping in the mud, the green glow pulsing faster, brighter. The shacks seemed to shift, their shapes blurring, the pit yawning wider as I passed. I don't know how I found the road again, but I did, my truck looming out of the fog like a ghost. I climbed in, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I didn't look back. I drove, the fog pressing in, the whispers clawing at my mind. The mile marker appeared again, mile 13, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The road stretched on, endless, the fog thickening until I couldn't see the lines anymore. I drove until the whispers faded, until the fog thinned, until I saw a gas station sign glowing in the distance. It's been a month since that night. I'm back in my apartment, but nothing feels right. The whispers are still with me, faint but constant, like static in my brain. I don't sleep much. When I do, I dream of the pit, the green glow, the thing in the mirror. My hands shake when I hold a coffee mug, and sometimes I find marks on my skin-thin, curving lines like the spirals on those walls. They fade by morning, but they're always back by night. I tried to find Highway 17 again to prove it was real, but it's not on any map. I drove the route last week, and there was no mile marker, no clearing, no shacks. Just trees and fog and silence. But yesterday, I found something in my truck, tucked under the passenger seat, piece of stone, smooth and cold, carved with a spiral that makes my eyes ache. I don't remember taking it. I don't remember a lot of things. Last night, I woke up to the whispers again, louder, closer. I turned on the light, and there it was in my wall, a shadow that wasn't mine. Too tall, too thin, its head tilted like it was listening. I blinked, and it was gone, but the whispers stayed, and so did the glow of faint green light seeping from under my bedroom door. I don't know what I found out there, on mile 13. I don't know what followed me home. But the whispers are growing louder, and every night they call me back to the fog, to the pit, to the thing that isn't a thing. And I'm starting to think it's not a question of if I'll go back, but when. The Whispering Pines. I don't know why I kept the old cassette tape. It was just sitting there in a cardboard box labeled Dad's Junk when I cleaned out his attic after he passed. Most of it was worthless rusted tools, faded Polaroids, a couple of fishing lures tangled in twine. But that tape, labeled Pine Hollow, 1993 in his shaky handwriting, felt different. Heavy, somehow. I should have tossed it. I wish I had. My name's Caleb, and I'm not the kind of guy who believes in ghost stories. I'm a mechanic, 34 years old, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Boise, Idaho. I fix engines, drink cheap beer, and mind my own business. But that tape, it's why I'm telling you this now, with my hands shaking and the lights on at 2 a.m. Because what I heard on it, what I found changed everything. It started last fall when I drove up to Pine Hollow, a speck of a town in northern Idaho, to settle my dad's estate. He'd lived there his whole life. A quiet man who kept to himself after Mom left when I was a kid. Pine Hollow's the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked population 412, one gas station, one diner, and a whole lot of nothing else. The town's nestled in a valley surrounded by dense pine forests, the kind that seem to swallow sound and light. The air always smells like sap and damp earth, and the wind carries this low, eerie whistle when it cuts through the trees. Dad's house was a sagging two-story on the edge of town, backed right up against the woods. The attic was a mess, and I spent days sorting through his stuff. That's when I found the tape tucked inside a metal fishing tackle box. No player, just the cassette, its plastic case cracked but intact. I figured it was one of Dad's old fishing trip recordings she used to narrate his outings like some wannabe nature documentarian. But the label, Pine Hollow 1993, bugged me. That was the year I turned 2, the year Mom left, the year Dad stopped talking about the woods. I didn't have a cassette player, so I drove to the only electronics store in a 50-mile radius, a pawn shop in Coeur d'Alene. The guy behind the counter, a wiry dude with a neck tattoo, sold me a dusty Walkman for $10. That night, back at Dad's house, I sat at the kitchen table, the tape in hand, hesitating. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Outside, the pines swayed in the wind, their branches scratching the roof like fingers on a chalkboard. I popped the tape in and pressed play. Static hissed through the headphones, loud enough to make me wince. Then Dad's voice came through, low and unsteady, not the warm baritone I remembered from childhood. October 12, 1993. This is John Tanner. If you're listening to this, something's gone wrong. I'm in the woods behind Pine Hollow, near the old logging trail. I don't know what's out here, but it's not right. A pause. Wind howled through the recording, sharp and biting. Then a low, guttural hum, like a distant machine, but softer, almost alive. My skin prickled. It started 3 nights ago. I saw something out here, in the trees. Eyes, maybe. Too big to be a bear, too still to be human. I thought it was nothing, just my head playing tricks. But it's been following me. Watching. Last night, it got closer. I heard it whispering my name. The tape cut out for a second, then snapped back. Dad's voice was quieter now, like he was crouching, hiding. I'm leaving this here in case I don't make it back. If you find this, don't come looking for me. Don't go into the pines. The recording ended with a sharp click. I sat there, frozen, the Walkman still buzzing faintly in my ears. The kitchen felt colder, the shadows deeper. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see something staring back from the tree line. Nothing but darkness and the faint sway of branches. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights on, the tape on the table like some cursed artifact. Part of me wanted to burn it, to pretend I'd never heard it. But another part, the part that remembered Dad's haunted eyes when he'd talk about the woods, needed to know more. The next morning, I drove to Pine Hollow's diner, a greasy spoon called Mabel's. The place smelled like burnt coffee and bacon, and the vinyl booths were cracked from years of use. I figured if anyone knew about weird stuff in town, it'd be the locals. I sat at the counter, nursing a coffee, and struck up a conversation with the waitress, a woman in her 60s named Dot. She had a smoker's rasp and a no-nonsense stare. "You're John Tanner's boy, aren't you?" she said, refilling my mug without asking. "Yeah, Caleb. I'm just here to clean out his place." She nodded, her eyes flicking to the window toward the woods. "He was a good man, your dad. Kept to himself after 93. My pulse quickened. What happened in 93? Dot's face tightened, like she'd said too much. She wiped her hands on her apron and leaned in, voice low. "Folks don't talk about it much. That was a bad year. People went missing, hikers mostly. Some said it was a bear, others said something else. Your dad was out in those woods a lot back then. Came back different, quieter. Did he ever say what he saw?" She shook her head. "Not to me, but you might ask old man Carver. He and your dad were tight back in the day, lives out on Route 17, last house before the highway." I thanked her and left, the tape burning a hole in my jacket pocket. The drive to Carver's place took me past fields of dying grass and rusted mailboxes. His house was a squat, weather-beaten cabin surrounded by junked cars and stacks of firewood. Carver himself was outside, splitting logs, a wiry old man with a face like crumpled leather. He squinted at me as I pulled up. "You John's kid?" he called, not breaking his swing. "Yeah, Caleb. Can we talk?" He set the axe down and gestured to a pair of lawn chairs by the porch. We sat, the air heavy with the smell of pine and motor oil. I told him about the tape, about Dad's voice, the hum, the warning. Carver listened, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Your dad wasn't crazy," he said finally. "Something's been in those woods for a long time. Not a bear, not a wolf, something older. Folks around here call it the Whisperer." I felt a chill, despite the midday sun. "The Whisperer?" He nodded, spitting into the dirt. "Old stories, from before the town was even here. Loggers used to talk about it, something that lives in the pines, calls your name, draws you in. You hear it, you're marked. Most don't come back." "Did Dad see it?" Carver's eyes darkened. He saw something. 93 was when it got bad. 5 people went missing that fall. Hikers, couple of kids, no bodies, no tracks. Just gone. Your dad went out looking for one of them, a girl named Sarah Mills. He came back, spooked, wouldn't talk about it, stopped going into the woods after that. I swallowed hard, the tape's weight pressing against my chest. "What do I do with this? The tape, I mean." Carver leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Burn it! Stay out of the pines! Whatever's out there, don't forget." I didn't burn the tape. I couldn't. It was like a splinter in my mind, digging deeper every time I thought about it. That night, I sat in Dad's living room, the Walkman in my lap, replaying the recording. The hum, the wind, Dad's spirit was all so vivid, like I was there with him. I kept thinking about what Carver said. The Whisperer. It sounded like a campfire story, but Dad's voice, that wasn't a story. That was real. Against every shred of common sense, I decided to go into the woods. I had to know what Dad saw, what scared him so bad he never spoke of it. I waited until dawn, when the light felt safer, and packed a backpack with a flashlight, water, a hunting knife, and the tape. The old logging trail Carver mentioned was still there, a faint dirt path snaking into the forest behind Dad's house. The pines loomed overhead, their branches knitting together to block out the sky. The air was thick with the scent of resin and decay, and every step crunched on a carpet of needles. The trail was overgrown, barely visible in places. I followed it for maybe an hour, my boots sinking into the soft earth, my breath fogging in the chill. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, just the occasional creak of a tree in the wind. I kept my eyes on the ground, looking for anything a footprint, a broken branch, a sign Dad had been here. Nothing. Then I heard it. A hum, low and steady, like a generator buried underground. My heart stuttered. It was the same sound from the tape, but clearer, closer. I froze, straining to listen. The hum seemed to pulse, rising and falling like a heartbeat. It wasn't coming from any one direction, it was everywhere, vibrating through the trees, the ground, my bones. "Caleb." "My name," whispered soft as a breeze. I spun around, knife in hand, but there was nothing. Just pines, stretching, endless and dark. My pulse hammered in my ears, and for a second I thought I saw something, a shadow, tall and thin, flickering between the trees. But when I blinked, it was gone. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I kept going, deeper into the woods, the hum growing louder, the air heavier. The trail petered out, leaving me in a clearing ringed by ancient pines, their trunks gnarled and twisted like they'd been screaming for centuries. In the center was a pile of stones, moss-covered and uneven, like a makeshift altar. Scratched into one of the stones was a Symbol spiral with jagged lines radiating out, like a sun with broken rays. The hum was deafening now, a low throb that made my teeth ache. I knelt by the stones, my hands shaking as I brushed away the moss. Beneath it, carved into the rock, was a name, Sarah Mills. My stomach dropped. The girl Carver mentioned, the one Dad went looking for. There were other names too, half erased by time. Thomas Reed, 1978. Ellen Carter, 1965. James Holt, 1952. dozens of them etched into the stones like a memorial or a warning. Caleb. The whisper came again, closer this time, right behind me. I stumbled back, my knife slipping from my sweaty grip. The air felt wrong, like it was pressing down on me, thick and suffocating. I grabbed my flashlight and swung it around, the beam cutting through the gloom. Nothing, just trees and shadows and that goddamn hum. Then I saw it. At the edge of the clearing, half hidden by a pine, was a figure, tall, impossibly thin, its limbs bent at wrong angles, like a marionette with cut strings. Its face, if it had one, was lost in shadow, but I could feel it watching me, its gaze heavy and cold. My flashlight flickered, the beam stuttering, and in that split second, the figure was gone. I ran. I don't know how long or how far, branches clawing at my face, my breath ragged in my throat. The hum chased me, louder with every step, and my name echoed through the trees, over and over, in a voice that wasn't human. I didn't stop until I stumbled out of the woods, back onto Dad's property, the house looming like a lifeline. I locked the door, barricaded it with a chair, and sat there, panting, the knife clutched to my chest. I didn't leave the house for 2 days. I kept the lights on, the curtains drawn, the tape locked in a drawer. Sleep came in fits, broken by nightmares of spiraling symbols and eyeless faces. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, sounded like my name being whispered. I called a realtor and told her to sell the place as is. I didn't care about the money, I just wanted out. But the tape, I couldn't leave it behind. On my last day in Pine Hollow, I drove to Carver's house, the cassette in my pocket. He was on his porch, whittling a piece of wood into something shapeless. I told him what I'd seen, what I'd heard. He didn't look surprised. "You saw it," he said, not a question. "The Whisperer." "What is it?" My voice cracked, and I hated how small it sounded. Carver set his knife down, his eyes distant. "No one knows. Some say it's a spirit tied to the land. Others say it's older, something that was here before the trees, before the people. It takes what it wants. Marks you, calls you, pulls you in. Your dad got away, but most don't." "Why didn't he tell me?" Carver sighed. "He wanted to protect you. Thought if he stayed quiet, it'd leave you alone. But you went looking. You heard it call your name." I handed him the tape. "Burn it, please." He took it, his fingers brushing mine, and nodded. I drove back to Boise that night, the rearview mirror empty, but my nerves screaming. I kept checking, expecting to see that figure in the road, its broken limbs swaying. It never came. That was 6 months ago. I'm back in Boise, back to fixing cars, back to my routine, but it's not the same. I don't sleep much. I keep the TV on at night, drowning out the silence. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I hear that hum, faint and far away. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I hear my name. I checked online, trying to find anything about Pine Hollow, about the missing people. There's nothing, just a few articles about hikers lost in the 90s, no details, no follow-up. The town's barely a blip on the map. I called Carver last week, but his phone's disconnected. I don't know if he burned the tape. I don't know if it matters. Last night, I found something in my apartment, tucked behind the couch. A cassette tape, cracked plastic case labeled Pine Hollow 1993. I don't know how it got there. I don't want to know. I locked it in a drawer, but I can still hear it, even now as I type this. The hum, the whisper, my name. If you're reading this, if you find this story, do me a favor. Stay out of the pines. The hollow beneath. I don't tell this story to scare people. I tell it because I need someone to believe me. My name's Hannah, and I'm 29, a nurse who moved to Black Creek, Montana, 2 years ago for a job at the county clinic. Black Creek's a nowhere town, population 600, surrounded by endless wheat fields and a single stretch of forgotten highway. The kind of place where the sky feels too big and the nights too dark. I thought it'd be quiet, a fresh start after a bad breakup. But what happened last winter, what I found under that gas station, changed me. I don't sleep anymore. I don't trust silence. It started with a patient, an old man named Amos Reed. He came into the clinic one November evening, shivering in a threadbare coat, his eyes wild and bloodshot. His hands were raw, like he'd been digging in frozen dirt. I was working the night shift alone, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and stale coffee. Amos wouldn't sit still, kept muttering about the hollow and the voices under the pumps. I figured he was drunk or off his meds. Black Creek had its share of eccentrics, but his fear was real, raw, like he'd seen something that broke him. "They're down there, Hannah," he whispered, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. His nails dug into my skin, leaving crescent-shaped marks. "Under the gas station on Route 12, they talk to me when I fill up my truck. They know my name." I humored him, checked his vitals, and sent him home with a referral to a psych in Billings. But his words stuck with me, burrowing into my thoughts like a splinter. The gas station, he mentioned, was the only one in town, a rundown Texaco with flickering neon signs and pumps so old they creaked when you used them. I passed it every day on my way to work, its cracked pavement and peeling paint a constant in Black Creek's gray landscape. I'd never thought much of it until Amos. A week later, I heard he was dead. Found in his truck off Route 12, engine still running, his eyes wide open and his hands clutching the wheel. The coroner called it a heart attack, but the sheriff's deputy who came by the clinic said something else. "No marks on him," he told me, his voice low. But the way he looked, like he saw something he couldn't unsee. I tried to shake it off. Small towns breed rumors, and I wasn't the type to buy into ghost stories. But that night, driving home past the Texaco, I slowed down. The station was dark, the pumps standing like silent sentinels under the sodium lights. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming, though the sky was clear. I don't know why I stopped. Curiosity, maybe? Or something else. Something I can't explain. I pulled into the lot, my headlights cutting through the darkness, and sat there, engine idling, staring at the pumps. That's when I heard it. A low, rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat pulsing through the ground. It wasn't loud, but it was wrong, like it didn't belong in the world. My skin prickled, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move near the pump's shadow. Too tall, too thin, gone when I blinked. I told myself it was the lights playing tricks, but my hands were shaking as I drove away. How? I couldn't let it go. Amos's words, the thrum, the shadow, they haunted me. The next night, I went back. It was stupid, I know, but I needed answers. I parked behind the station, where the lot backed up to a field of dead grass, and grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar from my trunk. The station was closed, the windows dark. The only sound, the faint hum of the neon sign flickering Texaco in red and white. The air smelled of gasoline and something sour like rotting leaves. The pumps stood in a row, their hoses coiled like snakes. I walked to the one farthest from the station, where Amos said he'd heard the voices. The thrum was there again, stronger now, vibrating through my boots. I knelt down, shining my flashlight on the concrete slab beneath the pump. It looked ordinary, cracked and stained, but there was a seam, a faint outline of a trap door, barely visible under years of grime. My heart pounded. I shouldn't have been there. I should have called someone, anyone. But I wedged the crowbar into the seam and pried. The slab gave way with a groan, revealing a rusted metal hatch, maybe 3 feet square. The thrum was louder now, a deep, bone-rattling pulse. I hesitated, my breath fogging in the cold, then pulled the hatch open. A wave of damp, earthy air hit me, carrying the stench of mildew and something metallic, like old blood. Below was a ladder, its rungs slick with condensation, descending into darkness. I don't know what possessed me to climb down. Maybe it was the same thing that made Amos keep going back. The ladder creaked under my weight, and the thrum grew louder, echoing in my chest. My flashlight beam barely cut through the dark, illuminating rough stone walls that glistened with moisture. The air was thick, oppressive, like breathing through a wet cloth. At the bottom, maybe 20 feet down, was a tunnel, narrow and low, carved into the earth. The walls were uneven, etched with strange symbol spirals, jagged lines, shapes that hurt to look at too long. The thrum was deafening now, a living thing that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I followed the tunnel, my flashlight shaking in my hand, the crowbar heavy in the other. The air grew colder, the smell of blood stronger. The tunnel opened into a chamber, maybe 30 feet across, its ceiling lost in shadow. The floor was dirt, soft and wet, and in the center was a pit, perfectly round, maybe 10 feet wide. The thrum came from there, a deep, unending drone that made my teeth ache. I edged closer, my flashlight beam trembling. The pit was deep, too deep for the light to reach the bottom. But there was something down there movement, faint and fluid, like oil shifting in water. And then I heard it. My name, Hannah. A whisper, soft and dry, like leaves scraping stone. It didn't come from the pit. It came from behind me. I spun around, my flashlight catching nothing but empty air. The chamber felt smaller, the walls closer, like they were breathing. Hannah. The whisper came again, from the left now, then the right, circling me. My pulse roared in my ears, and I backed toward the tunnel, my crowbar raised. The shadows moved, not like a person, not like anything I could name, just shapes, tall and wrong, flickering at the edge of my light. I ran. The tunnel seemed longer going back, the symbols on the walls pulsing in time with the thrum. My flashlight flickered, the beam stuttering, and the whispers followed, my name over and over, in voices that weren't humansome, deep and guttural, others high and sharp, like children but cruel. I climbed the ladder, my hands slipping on the rungs, the crowbar clattering into the dark below. When I reached the hatch, I slammed it shut and dragged the concrete slab back into place, my arms burning with the effort. I didn't stop running until I was in my car, doors locked, engines screaming as I tore out of the lot. The thrum faded, but the whispers didn't. They followed me home, faint and distant, echoing in my head as I locked every door and window, drew the curtains, and sat on my couch clutching a kitchen knife. I didn't go to work the next day, or the day after. I called in sick, my voice shaking as I lied about the flu. I couldn't tell anyone what I'd seen, what I'd heard. They'd think I was crazy, like Amos. But I wasn't crazy. I knew what was down there. Something old, something that knew my name, something that wanted me to come back. I tried to research the gas station, the town, anything that could explain it. Black Creek's records were sparse, but I found a mention in an old newspaper clipping from 1957 buried in the library's microfiche. A construction worker had gone missing while installing the station's fuel tanks. No body, no trace, just a note that the ground was unstable and the project was delayed. Another article from 1972 mentioned a string of disappearance struckers, mostly last seen at the Texaco. The locals called it bad luck. I knew better. I went back to the station one last time, in broad daylight, because I needed to know it was real. The hatch was still there, the concrete slab undisturbed, but the seam was tighter, like someone or something had sealed it. The thrum was gone, the air still. I didn't dare open it again. I poured salt around the pumps, a trick my grandma swore by, and left. That was 3 months ago. I quit my job, moved to Missoula, tried to start over. But it's not over. The whispers come at night, faint but clear, my name slipping through the walls of my apartment. I've seen shadows outside my window, too tall, too thin, gone when I turn on the light. Last week, I found dirt under my fingernails, black and wet, like the soil from that chamber. I don't remember digging. I drive a different route now, avoiding highways, avoiding gas stations. But I know it's still out there, under Black Creek, under the pumps, waiting. It knows my name. It knows I found it. And it's patient. If you're ever in Black Creek, filling up at that old Texaco, listen close. If you hear a thrum, a whisper, your name in the dark run, don't look back. Don't go down. The Lantern Road. I never believed in places that could watch you. Not until I found the Lantern Road. My name's Caleb Hart, a surveyor for a land development company sent to scout a forgotten stretch of land in northern Maine. The job was simple: map an old logging route for a potential resort. The client provided coordinates and a single instruction: follow the lanterns. I thought it was a quirky way to mark the trail, nothing more. But the moment I stepped onto that road, I knew I'd walked into something wrong, something that had been waiting. It started with a phone call from my boss, Karen, late on a Friday. She sounded rushed, her voice clipped. "Caleb, we got a rush job. Some rich guy wants a survey of a plot near Millinocket. Old logging road, unmarked, no name. Locals call it the Lantern Road. You're the only one free. Can you be there by morning? I wasn't thrilled. Millinocket was a 6-hour drive from my place in Bangor Butt. The pay was double, and I needed the cash. She emailed me the coordinates and a grainy photo of a dirt path lined with rusted lanterns. Their glass cracked, their frames twisted. The caption read, "Follow the lanterns. Don't stray." I figured it was some eccentric landowner's idea of a landmark. I arrived at dawn. The sky, a dull gray that seemed to press down on the forest. The coordinates led to a break in the trees, where a narrow path snaked into the woods. The lantern road was exactly as the photo showed. A rutted dirt track, barely wide enough for my Jeep, flanked by ancient lanterns every 50 feet or so. They were old, maybe a century, their metal pitted with rust, their glass clouded with age. None of them were lit, but they gave off a faint glow, like they'd soaked up the last light of the sun. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of damp moss and something sharper, like ozone after a storm. My boots sank slightly into the soft earth, and the silence was absolute tenno birds, no rustle of leaves, just my own breathing, loud in my ears. I slung my survey gear over my shoulder and started walking, GPS in hand, marking the path's boundaries. The lanterns were my guide, their eerie glow cutting through the morning fog. At first, it was routine. Measure distances, note elevations, snap photos. But the deeper I went, the more the road felt alive. The lanterns seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, their positions slightly off from where I'd marked them. My GPS flickered, the screen glitching, showing me miles from where I knew I was. I chalked it up to bad reception, but my skin prickled, like I was being watched from the trees. By noon, I'd gone maybe a mile when I found the first anomaly. A lantern, unlike the others, was pristine, its glass clear, its frame gleaming as if polished. It hung from a gnarled oak, and inside it burned a flame, small but steady, casting a warm, golden light. I stopped, my breath catching. There was no fuel source, no wick, just a flame floating in the air. I reached out, my fingers inches from the glass, and felt a pulse, like a heartbeat, thrumming through the lantern. My head swam, a low hum filling my mind. Not a sound, but a sensation, like static crawling under my skull. I backed away, my heart pounding, and kept going, telling myself it was just fatigue, a trick of the light. The road grew stranger the further I walked. The lanterns multiplied, clustering closer together, their glow brighter, almost blinding in the dim forest. The trees leaned inward, their branches knitting together overhead, forming a tunnel of green and shadow. The air grew colder, the ozone smell stronger, stinging my nose. I started hearing things whispers, not words, but fragments, like half-remembered conversations. They came from the lanterns, their flames flickering in time with the sounds. Caleb, stay, see. My name, woven into the murmurs, made my stomach lurch. I checked my GPS again, but it was useless, the screen frozen on a blank grid. I don't know when I noticed the footprints. They were in the dirt beside the path, faint but clear, matching the tread of my boots. But I hadn't walked there. I'd stayed on the road, following the client's instructions. Don't stray. The prints led into the trees, disappearing into the underbrush. I told myself it was another hiker, maybe a hunter, but the forest was too quiet, too empty. I kept moving, faster now, my survey notes forgotten. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the lantern's flames pulsed, their lights strobing in a way that made my head throb. At dusk, I reached a clearing. The road ended abruptly, the lanterns forming a circle around a patch of bare earth. In the center stood a single lantern, larger than the others, its flame a deep, unnatural blue. The air around it shimmered, like heat rising from asphalt, and the hum in my head became a chorus, a cacophony of voices calling my name. I dropped my gear, my hands shaking, and approached the lantern. Up close, I saw it wasn't empty. Inside the flame, shapes moved faces, distorted and fleeting, their mouths open in silent screams. I recognized one, impossibly. My father, who died when I was a kid, his eyes wide with terror. I stumbled back, my breath ragged, and that's when I saw her, a woman standing at the edge of the clearing, her face hidden in shadow. She wore a long coat, tattered and gray, and her hands were clasped in front of her, holding something I couldn't see. The whispers stopped, the air still, as she stepped forward. Her voice was soft, almost tender, but it carried a weight that made my knees buckle. "You followed the lanterns," she said. "You always do." I tried to speak, to ask who she was, what this place was, but my throat was dry, my words stuck. She moved closer, her face still obscured, and I saw what she held. A lantern, identical to the one in the center, its flame blue and writhing. "They want to show you," she said, her voice curling into my thoughts. "Look." I didn't want to, but my eyes were drawn to the flame. The faces were clearer, now men, women, children, their expressions shifting from fear to anguish to something like ecstasy. And then I saw myself, my face in the flame, my mouth open, my eyes empty, the hum surged, filling my skull, and I felt Oedipal like a tide dragging me under. The woman's hand touched my shoulder, cold and heavy, and she whispered, "Join us." I don't know how I broke free. One moment, I was staring into the flame. The next I was running, the lantern's light blurring past me. The road seemed to twist, the path looping back on itself. The lanterns multiplying, their flames roaring now, a wall of fire and sound. The whispers screamed my name, and the woman's voice was everywhere, soft and relentless. "You can't leave. You're already here." My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I kept running, the forest a maze of shadows and light. I woke in my Jeep, parked at the edge of the highway, my clothes soaked with sweat, my gear gone. The sun was high, the forest silent again. My GPS was blank, its memory wiped, and my phone showed no signal, no record of the photos I'd taken. I drove back to Bangor, not stopping until I reached my apartment. I told Karen I'd gotten sick, couldn't finish the job. She didn't push, but her voice was strange, distant, like she knew I was lying. I tried to forget the lantern road, but it's in me now. At night, I hear the hum, faint but growing, and I see the lanterns in my dreams, their flames flickering behind my eyes. I've found scratches on my arms, thin and precise, like they were carved by something sharp and deliberate. Last week, I found a lantern on my doorstep, small and rusted, its flame burning softly. I didn't touch it, but I heard her voice, the woman's whispering from inside, "He'll come back." I've moved twice since then, but the hum follows and the lanterns keep appearing in my porch, in my car, outside my window. I don't know what they are or what they want, but I know they're not done with me. If you're ever in Maine, if you see a dirt road lined with lanterns, don't follow them. Don't look at the flames. Because once you do, the road doesn't let you go. The hollow bell. The bell rang at 3:17 a.m. A single low chime that echoed through the empty streets of Coldwater, Montana, and woke me from a dead sleep. I'm Theo Grant, a mechanic by trade. Not the kind of guy who spooks easily, but that sound it wasn't right. It came from the old church at the edge of town, a sagging relic no one stepped foot in since the 80s. The bell shouldn't have rung. Its clapper was long gone, stolen, or rusted away, and the church was boarded up, left to rot in the shadow of the Bitterroot Mountains. I lay in bed, my heart pounding, waiting for another chime. It didn't come. Just silence, thick and heavy, like the town was holding its breath. Coldwater's the kind of place where nothing happens. A gas station, a diner, a handful of houses, and a population you can count on both hands. I'd moved here 2 years ago, running from a bad breakup and a worse debt, figuring a nowhere town was the perfect place to disappear. But that night, the bell's chime stuck with me, a splinter in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling it was calling me. The next morning, I drove to the church, my pickup rattling over the frost-cracked road. The air was sharp, smelling of pine and wet earth, with a faint metallic tang I couldn't place. The church loomed ahead, its steeple leaning slightly, like it was tired of standing. The windows were boarded, the paint peeling in long gray strips, and the door was padlocked, though the chain was rusted, brittle. I walked the perimeter, my boots crunching on frozen grass, looking for signs of a prank kids, maybe, or some drunk messing around. Nothing. Just the bell tower, its silhouette stark against the gray sky, and that uneasy feeling like eyes watching from the shadows. I stopped at Mabel's diner for coffee, hoping to shake off the chill. Mabel, a wiry woman with eyes like a hawk, poured me a cup and leaned on the counter. Heard the bell last night, she said, not asking, just stating it like fact. You check it out? Yeah, I said, sipping the bitter brew. Nothing up there. You know what's with that bell? Her face tightened, her fingers drumming on the counter. Folks say it rings when someone's marked. Old story, not worth repeating. She turned away, busying herself with a coffee pot, but I caught the flicker of fear in her eyes. I pressed her, but she clammed up. And the other regular sand old man, named Gus, and a trucker passing through weren't any help. Gus just muttered about bad winters and went back to his eggs. The trucker shrugged, his eyes darting nervously. Heard it too, huh? Stay away from that place, Theo. Ain't nothing good comes from messing with that bell. I drove back home, the diner's warmth fading as the cold crept back into my bones. Mabel's words, someone's Marquetta code in my head, and I couldn't help but wonder who. The town felt different now, the silence heavier, the shadows longer. That night, I couldn't sleep. The memory of the bell's chime lingered, low and mournful, like a warning I didn't understand. Around midnight, I heard another sound of faint scratching, like nails on wood, coming from my front door. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept to the living room, my pulse racing. The scratching stopped as I approached, but when I opened the door, there was nothing, just a single mark on the frame, a thin, deliberate scratch, like someone had dragged a knife across it. The next day, I went back to the church, this time with tools. The padlock on the door gave way with a quick pry, and I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and the sour smell of decay. The pews were splintered, the hymnals moldy, their pages stuck together. I climbed the rickety stairs to the bell tower, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The bell was there, massive and tarnished, its surface etched with strange symbol spirals, jagged lines, shapes that seemed to shift when I looked too long. There was no clapper, just as I'd thought, but the inside of the bell was smooth, polished, like it had been cleaned recently. On the floor beneath it was a small pile of ash, still warm, smelling faintly of something sweet and rotten. I took photos, my hands shaking, and sent them to a friend, an amateur historian named Rachel. She called me an hour later, her voice tight. Those symbols aren't random, Theo. They're old, pre-Christian, maybe older. Found on stones around here, tied to stories about the land choosing people. The bell, it's not just a bell, it's a signal. You need to leave. I laughed it off, told her she'd been reading too many ghost stories. But that night, the bell rang again. 3:17 a.m., one chime, deep and resonant, vibrating in my chest. I didn't go back to the church. Instead, I searched the house, looking for more scratches. I found them on the windowsills, the back door, even the mirror in my bathroom. Each one was identical, precise, like a signature. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I went to the town library, a cramped room in the community center with books older than me. I dug through local history, finding scraps about Coldwater's past. The church was built in 1883 on land the native tribes avoided, calling it hollow ground. There were stories of disappearance as loggers, settlers, kids going back centuries, all linked to the church, all after the bell rang. The most recent was a hunter, vanished last spring, his rifle found under the bell, surrounded by ash. The article called it a suicide, but the details didn't add up no body, no note, just the ash and those same strange symbols carved into the stock of his gun. I started noticing things in town. The way people avoided my eyes, the way conversations stopped when I walked into the diner. Gus, the old man, cornered me outside the gas station, his breath sour with whiskey. You heard it twice now, he said, his voice low. It don't ring for everyone. You stay, it'll ring again. And then, he trailed off, his hands trembling, and walked away. That night, the scratching came again. Louder, more insistent, moving from the door to the walls, like something circling the house. I turned on every light, checked every window, but saw nothing. Just more scratches, deeper now, some forming patterns that matched the symbols on the bell. I called Rachel again, and she sent me a scanned page from an old journal written by a preacher in 1890. He described the bell ringing on its own, calling people to the church where they'd join the hollow. He wrote of a presence in the ground, something that listened and chose, something that fed on those who answered its call. His last entry was a single line, "It knows my name." I decided to leave. Packed a bag, filled my truck with gas, and planned to drive to Missoula by dawn. But the bell rang again, 3:17 a.m., and this time the scratching was inside the house. I grabbed my bat, my flashlight, and searched every room. Nothing. But the mirror in my bathroom was uncovered, and in it my reflection wasn't right. My face, but not my expression. My mouth was moving, whispering words I couldn't hear, my eyes too dark, too empty. I smashed the mirror, the glass shattering, but the whispering didn't stop. It was in my head now, my name over and over, "Theo, come." I drove to the church, not knowing why, only that I had to. The door was open, the padlock gone. Inside, the air was cold, thick with that sweet rotten smell. The bell tower was lit, not by my flashlight, but by a faint glow from the bell itself, its cymbals pulsing with a sickly light. I climbed the stairs, my legs heavy, like wading through water. The bell was ringing, not a chime, but a low, continuous hum, vibrating in my bones. Beneath it, the ash pile was larger, and in it, I saw fragments bone, cloth, a watch with a cracked face, stopped at 3:17. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the bell, the hum filling my mind, drowning out my thoughts. Faces appeared in the shadows, people I didn't know, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in sync with the hum. They weren't there, not really, but I felt them, their presence pressing against me, urging me to stay. I saw my own face among them, not a reflection, but me, standing in the tower, my hands covered in ash. I ran. The road out of Coldwater was empty, the mountains looming like sentinels. My truck's engine sputtered, but I kept driving, the hum fading but never gone. I'm in Missoula now, crashing in a cheap motel, but the scratches keep appearing on my door, my car, my skin. They're faint, but they're there, forming those same symbols. The bell's hum follows me, a whisper in my dreams, calling me back. Last night, I found ash on my pillow, warm and sweet-smelling, and a note in my own handwriting, "Come to the hollow." I don't know what the bell is, or what lives in Coldwater's ground, but it knows me, it chose me, and it's waiting. If you're ever in Montana, if you hear a bell at 3:17 a.m., don't listen, don't go to the church, because once the hollow calls your name, it never stops. The Silent Ward. The scream woke me at 2:43 a.m. It wasn't Humanot exactly, but it cut through the stillness of Haven's End, a speck of a town in northern Wisconsin, like a blade through silk. I'm Avery Cole, a night shift nurse at St. Agnes Hospital, a crumbling brick building on the edge of town that should have been shut down years ago. The scream came from the third floor, the locked ward no one talks about, the one we call the silent ward because its patients never speak. I was alone at the nurse's station, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, when that sound hit me, raw and jagged, like something tearing itself apart. I froze, my pen hovering over a chart, my heart slamming against my ribs. The hospital was quiet again, but the air felt wrong thick, heavy, like it was pressing down on me. Haven's End is a nowhere place, a cluster of sagging houses and a diner that smells of grease and despair, nestled in a valley where the pines grow too tall and the winters last too long. St. Agnes is the town's lifeline, the only hospital for miles, but it's a relic leaky pipes, flickering lights, and a smell of antiseptic that can't mask the rot underneath. I'd taken the job 6 months ago, desperate for work, after a messy divorce, left me with nothing but debt and a car that barely ran. The night shift suited me. I liked the quiet, the way the world felt softer in the dark. But the silent ward, room 317, was different. It was off limits, its door always locked, its charts missing from the system. The other nurses whispered about it, stories of patients who didn't exist, of sounds no one could explain, but I'd never heard anything myself. Until that scream. I checked the monitors, my hands trembling. The third floor was dark, the cameras glitchy, showing only static where room 317 should have been. I radioed security, but Ed, the guard, was out back smoking, his voice crackling through the static. Probably just pipes, Avery. Old place creaks like hell. I wanted to believe him, but pipes don't scream. I grabbed my flashlight and headed to the stairwell, the air growing colder with each step. The hospital smelled of bleach and something sweeter, like overripe fruit, faint but persistent. My sneakers squeaked on the linoleum, the sound too loud in the silence. The third floor was a maze of locked doors and abandoned rooms, the air stale, the walls stained with watermarks that looked like faces if you stared too long. Room 317 was at the end of the hall, its door different from the other steel, not wood, with a keypad instead of a lock. I'd never seen it open, never seen a doctor or nurse go in. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. Nothing. Just the hum of the hospital, the distant drip of a faucet. Then, a faint scratching, like nails on metal, slow and deliberate, coming from inside. I backed away, my flashlight beam shaking, and noticed something new, a small symbol carved into the doorframe, a spiral with jagged edges. Like a wound. It hadn't been there yesterday. I didn't sleep when my shift ended. The scream stayed with me, looping in my head, and that symbol burned behind my eye. I drove to the diner, the only place open at 6 a.m., and asked Margie, the waitress, about the hospital. She'd lived in Haven's End her whole life, her face lined like old leather. St. Agnes ain't right, she said, pouring me coffee that tasted like tar. Built on bad land. Folks used to say the ground there listens. She wouldn't say more, just shook her head and muttered about keeping your distance. I couldn't let it go. That afternoon, I went to the town library, a cramped room in the community center with books that smelled of mildew. I found a history of Haven's End, a thin volume from the 70s. St. Agnes was built in 1910 on land donated by a reclusive family, the Harts, who'd vanished by 1920. There were stories of strange illnesses, patients who went mad, doctors who quit without explanation. The silent ward was mentioned once, in a footnote, room 317, reserved for special cases, closed to staff. No details, just a warning, do not enter without clearance. The book also mentioned the symbol I'd seen warding mark, tied to old stories about the land choosing people to speak for it. Back at the hospital that night, the air felt heavier, the lights dimmer. I checked the third floor cameras again, but they were still static, a gray snowstorm where room 317 should be. I avoided the ward, sticking to my rounds, but the scratching started again, louder, coming through the walls. Patients complained of nightmare shadows in their rooms, voices whispering their names. Mrs. Keller, an elderly woman in room 204, grabbed my arm as I adjusted her for. "It's singing," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Up there, in the quiet place. Don't listen, Avery." I brushed it off, told her it was the meds, but her words stuck with me, a cold knot in my stomach. Around 2 a.m., I found a note on the nurse's station, slipped under a chart. It was in my handwriting, but I hadn't written it. "Go to 317. It's waiting." My blood ran cold. I tore the note up, my hands shaking, and threw it in the trash. But the scratching grew louder, more insistent, and the lights flickered, plunging the hall into darkness for a split second. When they came back on, the trash can was empty, the note gone. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I took the stairs to the third floor, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The hall was colder than before, the air thick with that sweet rotten smell. The symbol on room 317's door was deeper now, the spiral glistening like it was wet. I tried the keypad, punching in random codes, but it wouldn't budge. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low hum, like a choir tuning up, coming from inside. "My name?" whispered soft and slow. "Avery, come." I backed away, my heart hammering, and ran back to the station. I called Ed, but his radio was off. I tried the hospital's main line, but it was dead, just static and a faint hum that matched the one in my head. I searched the records room, looking for anything on room 317. Most of the files were missing, but I found a locked drawer in the back, its key taped under the desk. Inside was a single folder labeled Ward 317 Restricted. It held patient logs, but the names were redacted, replaced with numbers. Patient 12, admitted 1,943, non-responsive, transferred to 317. disappeared. Patient 27, admitted 1,968, heard voices, transferred to 317, no record of discharge, dozens of entries, all the Semino outcomes just gone. The last page was a photo, grainy and old, showing a nurse standing in front of room 317's door, her face blurred, the spiral symbol carved into her hand. I didn't sleep after my shift. I drove to Missoula, to a friend's house, needing distance, needing answers. Rachel, my historian friend, met me at a coffee shop, her laptop open to scans of old documents. St. Agnes was a dumping ground, she said, her voice low. People who didn't fit mental cases, drifters, anyone the town didn't want, they sent them to 317. No one came back. The Harts, the family who built it, they believed the land was alive, that it needed voices to speak through. That symbol you saw, it's in their journals. They called it a key. I told her about the scream, the hum, the note. Her face paled. Get out of Haven's End, Avery. That place, it's not just haunted, it's hungry. I went back, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stay away. The hum was in me now, a constant drone, pulling me back to the hospital. That night, the third floor was different. The lights were out, the hall lit only by a faint glow from under room 317's door. The scratching was gone, but the hum was louder, a song without words, weaving through my thoughts. I found another note on the station, in my handwriting again. Open the door. This time, I didn't tear it up. I walked to room 317, my flashlight trembling, the spiral symbol glowing faintly, like it was alive. The keypad beeped, accepting a code I didn't know, 243, the time I'd heard the scream. The door clicked open, revealing a room that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a hospital room, no bed, no equipment, just a bare concrete floor and walls covered in spirals, hundreds of them pulsing with that same sickly light. In the center was a hole, a jagged pit in the floor, the hum pouring out of it like a living thing. I saw shapes in the dark faces, hands, eyes watching me, their mouths moving, singing my name. I don't know how long I stood there, the hum filling my mind, drowning out everything. I saw myself in the pit, my face among the others, my voice joining the song. A hand touched my shoulder, cold and heavy, and a voice whispered, "You're home." It wasn't human, not anymore, but it knew me, knew everything about me. I screamed, or thought I did, and ran, the door slamming shut behind me. I left Haven's End that morning, my car packed with what little I owned. I'm in Minneapolis now, crashing on Rachel's couch, but the hum follows me. It's quieter, but it's there. In my dreams, in the silence between heartbeats, I find spirals everywhere on my apartment door, in the margins of my notebooks, etched into my skin when I wake up. Last night, I found a chart in my bag, one I didn't write. Patient 84, Avery Cole, admitted to 317, singing, "I don't know what lives in St. Agnes, or what it wants, but it's not done with me." If you're ever in Haven's End, if you hear a scream at 2:43 a.m., don't go to the third floor. Don't open the door. Because once the silent word calls you, it never lets you go. The door at the end of the hall. The knocking woke me at 3:13 a.m. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and slow, coming from the door at the end of the hall in my new apartment in Black Hollow, Vermont. I'm Riley Kane, a graphic designer who'd fled Boston after a burnout left me hollowed out, chasing cheap rent and solitude in a town so small it barely registered on a map. The apartment was a Stila second-floor flat in a sagging Victorian house, its paint peeling like old skin, its windows rattling in the October wind. The landlord, a wiry man named Mr. Harrow, had handed me the keys with a warning, "Don't bother with the door at the end of the hall. It's locked. Always has been." I'd nodded, too tired to care, but that night, the knocking changed everything. The sound wasn't loud, but it was wrong precise, too measured, like someone was testing the door's strength. I lay in bed, my heart thudding, staring at the ceiling where shadows danced in the moonlight. The apartment was quiet otherwise, the kind of quiet that feels alive, pressing against your eardrums. I waited, breath held, for another knock. Nothing. just the faint creak of the old house settling, or so I told myself. But sleep wouldn't come. The air felt thick, heavy with the smell of dust and something sharper, like wet iron. I got up, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, and crept to the hallway. The hall was narrow, its wallpaper faded to a sickly yellow, curling at the edges. At the far end, maybe 20 feet away, was the door Mr. Harrow had mentioned plain wood, no knob, just a rusted keyhole and a faint crack running down its center. I'd barely noticed it when I moved in, assuming it led to storage or a sealed-off room. Now, it seemed to loom, the shadows around it deeper, almost liquid. I stood there, my phone's flashlight casting a weak beam, and listened. No knocking, no sound, just the hum of my own pulse. But as I turned away, I saw Ita's faint scratch on the doorframe, thin and jagged, like a claw mark. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrow, my voice shaky as I asked about the door. "Told you, don't bother with it," he snapped, his tone clipped. "Old house, old quirks. Leave it be." He hung up before I could press him. I tried to focus on work, setting up my laptop in the cramped living room, but my eyes kept drifting to the hall. The scratch was still there, deeper than I'd thought, and beside it was another, fresher, like it had been carved while I was on the phone. Black Hollow was a ghost of a town, a cluster of clapboard houses and a general store that doubled as a post office, nestled in a valley where the trees grew too dense and the fog never quite lifted. I went to the store that afternoon, hoping to dig up some local gossip. The clerk, an older woman named Esther, with eyes like chipped flint, gave me a tight smile when I mentioned the apartment. "Harrow's place, huh? You hear anything odd?" she asked, her hands pausing over the register. "Just the house settling," I lied, but her smile faltered. "Mind the door at the end," she said, her voice low. "Folks who live there, they don't stay long." She wouldn't say more, just handed me my change and turned away. Back at the apartment, I couldn't focus. The air felt heavier, the iron smell stronger, seeping from the hall. I searched online for anything about the house, but Black Hollow was a Black Holeno records, no history, just a few mentions of a fire in the 1920s that gutted half the town. The house, though, was older, built in 1890 by a family called the Wickers. They'd vanished by 1900, no trace, no explanation. I found a grainy photo on an obscure blog, showing the house in its prime, the door at the end of the hall clearly visible, unmarked, its keyhole glinting like an eye. That night, the knocking came again. 3:13 a.m., 3 raps, slow and deliberate. I didn't move, just lay there, my breath shallow, listening. The knock stopped, but then I heard something worsey whisper, soft and garbled like a voice underwater, coming from the other side of the door. "Riley? Open." My name, clear as day,